Prior to finding the new presentation, my thrill-seeking personal self-indulgence was out of a body travelling, what is more commonly known as astral projection. In actuality, rather an unnecessary pursuit, for as we all are this real awareness, part of the everything isness reality, so the true beingness of ourselves permeates through all consciousness affected form, feature, creational position and life level. In essence then, we need but shift our view, and we can experience anything within the simulators, as we choose the appropriate mechanics and vehicles, where whatever it is we wish to see is made available for us, like having access to an endless array of virtual reality headsets, which afford the simulation of every creational idea as it effects into the myriad expression of simulated position that it does. When operating with our intent set with the recognizing of the ears, everything we experience physical level and real side will be in association with this real intent. For everything is its immediate effects in the nowness of the ears, an intent already is its culmination, but through the design of the consciousness, so we rather have to go through the simulation to the culmination of an intent, but in actuality it is already a done deal. And really then, if intent is set with the ears, the recognition of the true reality, we already are then this recognition. But from the personal self perspective, so this process must unfold. All the experiences that are the viewpoints and comparisons required that the recognition of the ears be so, almost as though then it is the personal self that is dictating the speed by which this is accomplished, through the resistance it may present, the agreements and attachments it is loath to be separated from, until eventually seeing the sense of letting it all go. A mechanical created form, but one that has as though taken on a life of its own, and although essential for the ears recognizing imperative, it does rather present as a burden that must be eventually lessened, then released. But as I said, if intent is maintained, so will the culmination that already is effected become so. We just need a process through the simulation and experience to that point. And really then, what takes place between the intent's inception and actualization is rather secondary. It's just a case of perpetuating the focus with the intent and taking the necessary steps and actions as that which needs to be done becomes apparent, each step unveiled in our experiences. There's no point setting intent for a destination, and when the transportation means becomes available, that we elect not to get on board, for example. And so ultimately, as I said, with a real intent, so all our experiences are in a conjunction with the actualizing of this intent set with is recognition. Our experiences will make sense with life and awareness. In the meantime, we may choose our own creations or agreements to ideas that we then experience the effects of. Nothing is negated, as everything in creation are as viewpoint comparisons to recognize the is from. We simply endeavour to not be absorbed into the creations, to attach to them emotionally, as to do so, we then are locked into their effects, until releasing the attachment we have with our creations, or the ideas as created by others. As I said, Far better to set intent with the ears than deal with the experiences generated as a result. For as we utilize the personal self free will to add additional agreements, which will generate further effect experiences with those we already will be receiving through our focus with is recognizing intent, then we have a lot more by way of effects we now have to face and manage and deal with. And the personal self will never have the oversight of the creational view that is available through the real awareness. The personal self is more limited and will create on the basis of this more limited perspective, and very likely make somewhat ill-informed choices and effects for itself. But as I said, these still will afford comparison views regardless. The personal self in isolation will blunder through a creation, generating with reckless abandon all the experiences based on its primary inclination, that of a thrill-seeking, not realizing all the idea baggage and inadvertent agreement being trawled in the net as it goes about it, which will result then in all manner of effects that were not desired, but that still were in actuality decided, in addition to the consciousness choices being made. Astral projection would fit this thrill-seeking category, as rather than moving our awareness view through already existing vehicles for other dimensional and life-level exploration, we are instead maintaining our awareness through the physical level effecting and providing body forms, forming a kind of temporary additional vehicle, and projecting it from the physical and onto whichever life level or position our intent and focus has delivered it. Generally, the astral, as most will be limited to the physical and astral, by virtue of most unaware individuals being predominantly emotionally sensation astral vehicle and level inclined and based. And our little temporary astral projecting vehicle, where our awareness will operate through, will be connected to the physical body by a tether, a link, allowing that the vehicle be returned when our other dimensional exploration is complete. Such a practice will cause holes in the aura, as this temporary projected vehicle will actually punch through the auric field, as though causing a temporary damage to a field of energy which separates the physical from the astral, a hole which serves as a potential conduit for beings positioned on the astral to utilize and potentially encroach on the physical level. And considering the astral also incorporates the lower astral, the domain where the most twisted and evil intended beings dwell, a tenacious astral projector will undoubtedly have entity and demonic related issues, which I can personally attest to. The temporary holes or conduits can become permanent, as this practice is continuously indulged. Additionally, can the cord, the tether, which attaches the temporary projected vehicle to the physical body, be severed by other beings on the astral level, and then we cannot return to our physical bodies, and are resigned to remain in the position we have projected to. So many inherent risks with such a practice, and seldomly are such made mention of by those who promote astral projecting. A valid source of experience, to be sure, but the dangers should also be stressed. As I said, this was my preoccupation prior to determining the true reality and real awareness of ourselves, sound connection, the new you song, and then aligning the personal self that the real awareness takes the reins of what we term real side experiences, as opposed to the personal self free will formulating of ideas and choices that affect experience that can never be as awareness and life beneficial as that which is generated as we remain in the nowness of our real awareness, our intent set with the ears, and where we allow the experiences pertaining to this real intent to roll out accordingly. But despite this, on occasion will I project, for whatever reasons this was triggered, for the practice is somewhat ingrained, and when the conditions are right, so was this once an automatic process, and so it remains without conscious intent that it be so. I found myself projected into an area of creation. The position wasn't revealed, but I was standing before a group of very aware individuals, as impressions via the real awareness revealed. They appeared human, though their forms were somewhat in flux, as though constantly altering, as if they couldn't quite decide which human form they desired to maintain. They evidently were aware that I had projected, that I had developed this ability through the consciousness, and had in fact a project they wished me to accept. But first, they sought to determine my suitability for the post, as one of them produced now a kind of a crystal attached to a golden chain. He would hold it to my head, and on doing so, would the crystal's colour change from a white quartz to a purple hue. Apparently this determined my eligibility for the position they had in mind, and suggesting that as the colour purple is that associated with the ethereal body, the seat of intuition and the psychic science abilities, perhaps revealed to them was that I was an individual not limited to the astral and physical, as most personal self-immersed and consciousness-absorbed beings will be, that through the process of awareness we have a greater access then to all aspects and facets of the created self, including the recognition and standing as the real awareness we actually are, and the step beyond that, that of ultimately is recognition. That were I astral based predominantly, very likely the crystal may have turned red, the colour of this particular life level, etc., and this greater access of the full multi-dimensional created self that can be so with an awareness process embraced was what these beings were seeking for the position they had in mind. Impressions revealed these beings were well intended, well along the road of their respective awareness processes, as I said, and as they determined I also was more so multi-dimensional, and also on my own ears recognizing a journey, so would my intent also be overwhelmingly that which supports life and awareness, and is not restricting of it. For as it transpired, my assignment, if I accepted, and indeed I would do so, was to take under my wing, so to speak, a large group of humans, who were on the verge of stepping up and becoming aware, but just as it was with me, just prior to this next step, were they currently indulging in astral projection practice. For during my astral projecting days, although then unaware of it, as awareness of everything in association with what we are doing is more limited with the personal self alone, I had been watched over constantly and assisted by the real guides on many occasions. What with the risks involved with projecting the bodies as I mentioned earlier, and only later would I be shown how the guides had always been there and watching over my projecting activities, interjecting where necessary, for the guides would have realized that I was preparing for the next step, that of the real purpose is recognition. And this was the case here with this large group of humans, that these particular and very aware beings were tasked in watching over these humans and ensuring their well-being, but also that they were determining those suitable to assist them in this capacity through the utilizing of their crystal. That very possibly the humans I would assist and watch over may not even have the view afforded them that I was doing so, for from their more limited perspective, the personal self alone, the astral projecting experiences may look completely different to what was in actuality taking place. That, like me, where only later would I be shown the guide's efforts of interceding on my behalf, it was so that at the time of the projecting, where I was personal self-limited only, the guides and their assistants hadn't even featured visually. And so the scene would switch. I was in the presence of this large group of astral projecting humans, in a protective capacity, for as I said, they would not step into the real ears recognizing a purpose until they had indulged for a certain duration with their projecting practices. Then would they be ready to accept the ears references, and as impressions revealed, they would then all embrace them wholeheartedly. It's always a situation of not pushing too hard, too quickly, to gauge the pace by which an individual can be brought along, and not too swiftly that they are repelled or overwhelmed, and when the moment is right, then we deliver the new sound. In the meantime, then, I would be impressing upon them that beyond the physical, they are now only as limited as they decide that they are. That although even on the physical, as we sever agreements, we also can become somewhat boundless, oftentimes the effects of such take the moments and even lifetimes they do to actualize, whereas beyond the physical, so effects are instantaneous, unless we hold to the agreement that they are not, etc. And so the group of humans and myself, all currently having projected to our current position, so I would afford the realization of the limitless nature of their abilities, demonstrating my own shape altering, and as though putting them through a training that involved also the altering of their human forms to any body type they desired, and rather entertaining was it to observe all the forms they assumed, as they created all manner of exotic, outrageous, and outlandish body vehicles. As I said, a step at a time, they now were accepting of the potential limitlessness of their ability where other dimensional experiences were concerned. I would then convey to them the very real risks of such astral projecting practices, and remove them to a scene which presented as a kind of highway, and to one side of which was as though a glowing thin veil. For we were positioned in the astral, and this veil was the boundary, in fact, between our current astral position and the most forbidding creational area, what is referred to as the lower astral, whereas I mentioned earlier, the most twisted and distorted created consciousness-affected body forms will dwell. I was again impressing upon my human group the reality of this dark creational realm, that just as it had been with me and my astral projection practices of years ago, had I blundered into the lower astral on occasion, and my experiences then were somewhat unsavoury. So I was affording them the option that yes, they were intent on astral projecting yet a while before they would step up, but at least I could ensure they were not overly exposed to horrendous experiences involving ill-intended beings. At least not yet, as plenty of experiences involving the imposition of antagonistic body types would they encounter as they transitioned more so to real side, real awareness orchestrated experience, as opposed to personal self-thrill seeking and managed body projecting. But by then, so would their awareness processes that included releasing of all agreements and in relation to all other beings, ensure they could better handle all situations and ill-intended individuals, and in the meantime, before enhancing their ability to handle themselves, as they released the ideas which limited such, just as it was with me prior to finding the new sound, so they were being protected and watched over. The group were adamant, however, that they wanted to be shown the lower astral, for they couldn't accept such a place existed. They had the general consideration that the astral was a heavenly type area, that although such places do exist, the pre-designated dark force reptilian managed heavens of a man, etc., very real also is the existence of the more forsaken astral spots. And so I would agree to escort them through the veil and into the lower astral, and as I remained in their presence, so I could ensure their safety to an extent, but really only as much as their agreements allowed, as they, as we all are the deciders of our experiences. Nothing can be effected as our experience, including the desired actions and inclinations of others, unless we have the idea agreements that are the causes which manifest such as our simulation, and with those not even having begun this awareness, agreement facing and releasing a process, such as this group of humans, they then have a complete consciousness of lifetimes of agreements still held to, and are vulnerable then to the ill-intended inclinations of any being where agreement is extended to them in such a way that allows that such beings can bestow harm upon them or even eliminate them. Impressions revealed that the risk was minimal according to where in the lower astral we would venture, that agreements were in a place where potentially all manner of twisted lower astral based beings could potentially harm the group, but just as agreements dictate the ability of beings to assume provided roles as our attackers and slayers, so agreements can also present the role options of rescuer, protector, and assistance provider. I had such a role granted to me in relation to the group, that of a protector, that through their agreements, so I could assume and ensure their safety, and so I gave them a tour of the lower astral, or at least the areas of it where I could exercise my protective ability, as with certain lower astral spots, so the nature of the group's agreements more so leaned toward the ability of the monsters lurking there to eradicate them, and where my ability to intercede was lacking. And besides, it wasn't necessary to explore the entirety of the lower astral, for what was revealed to them was enough to impress upon them the reality of the forbidding nature of this particular creational area. For they would encounter the dark swampy regions, the gloomy and uninviting scenes, an array of twisted monsters, mutated creatures, and so forth, that it wasn't long before they requested that I escort them back, and we vacated the lower astral by entering a particular area where the ground was of a stone, and upon which were a selection of cars. The group and I would each enter a car, and so all the humans would follow me as I led them from the lower astral back to the veil and beyond the reach of the twisted beings that resided there. As I said, these humans would not take the next step, that of the real purpose of his recognition, until they had satisfied this particular personal self-want and thrill, and as they would all at some point take this next step, in the meantime they were afforded protection, as it was recognized that they would all indeed shortly be embracing their respective awareness processes, and until then they were being watched over by an assigned group of aware beings, and also was the opportunity afforded for others to assist, such as myself, as revealed in this experience.